We negate contention. One is foreign aid. Article 9 has turned Japan into the fourth largest aid donor globally. Furikuro 05 argues that foreign aid is the pillar of Japanese diplomacy and the government uses economic assistance to influence policies in developing countries due to the fact that all military actions are prohibited by Article 9. Unfortunately, revision provides Japan a militaristic alternative, as Hang 19 argues revising Article 9 could undermine decades of international aid flows, and Japan may lose incentive to make contributions because they don't have to rely on soft power, but instead shift to hard power. Japanese aid outflows are crucial, as Addison 15 contends infrastructure investment can lift millions out of poverty. Japan, with its experience, should continue to make a larger contribution. Contention 2 is Star Wars. Currently, FAT 20 rights to Japan is legally restricted when it comes to space capabilities based on Article 9. Japan's use of space is purely defensive. Affirming flips the script, however, as Tolfinson 18 warns that space may provide an avenue for the JSDF and revision of Article 9, which FAT contextualizes could materialize through the acquisition of strike capabilities and Japan's own ASATs. Weaponizing with Dragon China, as Cheng 09 concludes that Japan capable of undertaking space responses would arouse the ire of China, concluding a space race would precipitate. This risk conflict, as Finch 15 writes, that space is an offensive dominant domain. Holding targets at risk is far easier than defending them, and this could lead to first strike instability, creating pressure for early action, a clear recipe for miscalculation. Indeed, Mitchell 01 furthers that a backup would make more inevitable, and any nation subject to space attack would retaliate with nuclear weapons. Contention 3 is security guarantees. U.S. alliances stand strong. As Me 22 explains, overbearing Chinese policy in the Pacific has strengthened U.S. alliances, and the Russia's threat to Ukraine are reminding Europeans why Washington is a good ally. Unfortunately, affirming signals Japan doesn't trust America's military, as Wadsworth 19 explains, offensive capability could be interpreted by neighbors as a sign that Tokyo is losing confidence in the U.S., and it could start a chain reaction that more U.S. allies develop their own strike capabilities, increasing instability. Reducing confidence spills over. As Law 21 explains, that Asia Pacific plays a more important role in international affairs as it's home of half the world. The world order will be shaped by the politics of Asia Pacific, and the U.S. has to play its role. Confidence is key. As Brand 17 concludes, the U.S. allies deter aggressors by raising the possibility that an attack will be the fight with the world's most formidable military. Adding security guarantees allow us to underbuild the militaries and avert arms race security competitions in the earliest areas. Thus, Barnett 11 finds that the U.S. military resulted in a 99% drop in deaths due to war. Conversely, Man 14 concludes that reduced allied confidence in America's security guarantees could cause instability with weapons of mass destruction. Contention 4 is constitutional chaos, and subpoint A is revision spirals. Despite an occasional reinterpretation that CFR 20 explains, for 70 years, Japan's constitution has remained untouched, a symbol of democratic society. Breaking this taboo would open Pandora's box. As Sterling 20 explains, if Article 9 is revised, all other clauses would need to be revised because all other clauses of the Japanese constitution are interconnected. Japan's right-wing LDP would take advantage, turning Japan authoritarian. As Gordon 93 explained, revision of Article 9 would open the door to conservative revisions of other parts of the National Charter concerning guarantees of individual rights and status to the emperor. Concluding, the constitutional revision is the most dramatic concern about democracy in Japan. Specifically, Takahashi 16 confirms the LDP's draft revised constitution is a model for dictators everywhere. Rights would be restricted while authorities enjoy unfettered power. This would be devastating. As Solas 21 explains, Japan plays a central role in rekindling liberal internationalism, and the country boasts one of Asia's oldest democracy, concluding that Japan's credentials matter more at a time of widespread democratic backsliding. Beyond millions of direct deaths, that breeds existential threats. As Diamond 19 confirms, the main threats to security all stem from authoritarianism, whether supporting international terrorism, proliferating WMDs, or threatening neighbors. Subpoint B is modeling. Article 9 is pacified East Asia. Tennyson 17 explains Article 9 is deeply embedded in East Asian peace, but its role has never been recognized. Article 9 has hugely contributed to East Asia's pacification by creating a model of national peaceful development. Empirically, Tennyson 14 furthers in the years 1946 to 79, 80% of people killed in war were in East Asia. Since 1990, 3.5. Japan and Article 9 are the vanguard of that story, concluding that if it were revised, it would destabilize the region. In that event, Salim 13 warns, in a vicious cycle of regional tensions fuel each other in East Asia, escalating into a global conflict. This is devastating. As Dow 15 concludes, the next great power war would involve nuclear weapons inviting miscalculation. And Star 15 warns, a nuclear war would create an environment too cold and dark to grow food, and humans would vanish forever. Thus, we negate.
Great. Send to doc 2. Let me know when you get. Great. All right. It's sent.
We're ready when you are.
Perfect. All right, anyone not ready? All right, I'll start with my first one. We affirm contention one defense. The Shino 21 fund after Arlenman, Japan can only intercept missiles that are due to land on its territory. North Korea will fire missiles over Japan en route to other destinations. So your interpretation is needed to be finalized to play an active role in defending against an array of North Korean missiles. Importantly, Miki 22 finds that North Korea has tested intercontinental ballistic missiles able to deliver a nuclear warhead to much of the world, extending the range of its weapons by a factor of 30. Thus, Aftertense warns in two ways, and first is a second strike capability. Songhon 22 finds that North Korea has been building base strategically located for future ICBM launches to deter preemptive strikes from the United States against North Korea's most important weapons. Rover 19 terminalizes that developing a reliable second strike capability and overcoming American DMDs means that North Korea will develop hundreds of nuclear-tipped ICBMs and a war becomes thinkable. This is a future that the US cannot live with millions dead. Second is testing. The reason they shot into Japanese waters is because of Article 9. As Jones 17 explains, that Article 9 stipulates that Japan can only intercept missiles that are due to land on its territory. After understanding these legal constraints, it becomes clear by firing a missile over Japan, North Korea calculated that Japan's elaborate missile defenses would sit idle and increase the chance of a successful test. Letting testing happen causes miscalc. Sherman 18 finds that the potential for accident remains high, especially with untested systems. Future successes are not guaranteed and should be a future North Korean missile overflying and fail at the wrong moment during its powered flight phases. Its trajectory may come to resemble an attack on Japan. Contention 2 is legal ambiguity about Taiwan. The TOC 21 finds that legal constraints on Japan's defense policies remain strong even after new security legislation. Operations are limited to what counts as on an armed attack is highly controversial, and so debating whether a situation meets a legal test would necessarily delay deployments. Revision is thus key to eliminating the risk of miscalculation, as Bando 21 concludes that the US and Japanese leaders are busy making murky, often contradictory policy statements about Taiwan. They've infuriated China and increased the risk of miscalculation that could culminate in a catastrophic war. Greater clarity is urgently needed. Luckily, revision solves, as Daily 21 concludes, that remedying this confusion will help strengthen deterrence and ensure that Taiwan contingencies remain purely hypothetical. Contention 3 is political capital. The national debate over Article 9 wastes political capital. Vote AF because the national debate happens no matter what in Japan. Fiat ends that political issue because revision has been passed and the political issue is over. Japanese politics will then move on. Tatsumi 17, desire for constitutional revision has cost Japan political capital and left pressing domestic issues unattended. Reform of the tax system and entitlement programs require attention. As society continues to age, these systems will become fiscally unsustainable if not restructured. Indeed, Hornig 18 corroborates that an inordinate amount of time is wasted on the SDF's constitutionality, while opposition parties use this to score political points. Without economic reform, Japan will collapse. Committee 21 finds that the aging of Japan's population will continue to shrink fiscal space because of the increased cost and debt. Low interest rates will cause the yen to depreciate. Japan will drop out of the developed world. The clock is ticking on averting a financial disaster. The government must implement effective fiscal measures sooner rather than later. Contention 4 is gray zones. International pressures and revisionist leadership pushes China towards expansion. Lin 16 finds the anticipation of a weak response from Japan convinces the Chinese government to advance its interests. The CCP, facing challenges to domestic legitimacy, has incentives for diversion at a time of declining economic growth. And this will happen in the gray zone, as Akiyama 21 finds China gradually erodes the interests of other parties through low-level provocations, such as incremental expansionary actions building up to accomplishments. The United States has not shown where the red line is in the gray zone because that the frequency of intrusion by Chinese ships into Japanese waters has drastically increased. More than the amount of intrusions, Akiyama continues that emerging technologies increase the uncertainty of escalation calculations brought about by gray zone activities. And each of these hundreds of yearly intrusions risk war, and only revision stops the inevitable miscalculation. As Gomez 18 writes, that conflicting gray zones is of great concern, with the possibility that an accidental clash could escalate. Conventional strike capabilities would allow Japan to implement a deterrence by denial approach much more credibly. Tokyo does not need parity with China to effectively impose high military costs to counter Chinese overreach. War would be catastrophic. Payne 16 finds China is pursuing expansionist policies in Asia to overturn the status quo, and war using non-nuclear weapons would cause death levels beyond 100 million. To prevent that, we affirm.
Are you ready for cross?
Yeah, of course, man. You can have the first question.
Okay, cool. So why does China want to do these gray zones? What benefit do they get?
Their understanding is that if they keep doing gray zones and they keep seeing non-responsiveness, they can build up the amount of gray zone activity they do until eventually they can just have enough gray zone activities to, like, say, take control of an island, because Japan is too deterred by the amount of gray zone infractions to strike back.
You can have a question.
Sure. Let's talk about your argument on case about foreign aid.
Yeah.
Is foreign aid helpful for Japan?
What, like foreign aid
like,
to Japan?
Like the reason that, the foreign aid, is it helpful that Japan gives it to other countries? Like, does Japan think that it's of their national security is important?
We would argue,
to continue foreign aid?
We would argue it helps places like Thailand and the Middle East, and like they build a bunch of infrastructure.
And this gives Japan soft power, right?
Yeah. Can I take a question?
Right. Yeah. Well, really quick follow-up. If it gives them soft power and it's an effective strategy, why would they get rid of it?
Because it's more effective to use hard power.
Don't most countries use soft and hard power? Yeah, you can have a question. Well, that's kind of
Or I would say it's because they have the option, but we'll talk about that. Can you like try to explain like this political capital argument?
sure. So the issue that's happening right now in Japan is because they're spending so much time debating over this constitutionality issue on Article 9, they aren't passing any other important legislation. And because they have an aging population that makes it impossible for their fiscal systems to be able to survive and provide social security, it's going to end up with a collapsed Japanese economy unless they're able to free up the political capital needed to make economic reforms instead of just debating on the constitution. All right, let me ask you a question.
So
Can you name to me can you name to me a major power in the world who doesn't use both soft and hard power?
Yeah, Japan.
Other than Japan. Sorry. Russia?
What? I said, can I take a question?
Well, no, like other than Japan, though.
I mean, like, yeah, I could probably like look it up for you, but our point is that like when Japan has this option, they're gonna like use it way more and they're not gonna use as much aid. Also, I would say the bright line for our argument is also that like not only do they stop using hard power or soft power, but even if you don't want to buy that, right? The fact that they have the ability to use hard power now means that the amount of foreign aid, because right now foreign aid's all they have, right? This soft power is all they have. So it's like they're doing a huge amount of it, right? When you have hard power, A, you don't have to pay half as much. B, it's way more effective because it's hard power. So they're just gonna use it.
I'm just going to contest that. For example, like with countries like China, who've been expanding incredibly fast militarily, they also spent the most in the world on foreign aid this year. Like obviously you do both because it's in your interests. You can have a question.
Okay, cool. Let's go to this gray zones again. So
love gray zones.
What is is that time?
No, I just
so what is like the strategic benefit to like, slowly claiming gray zones if they're just like,
China, it's territorial expansion?
Well, that doesn't really answer my question. What's strategic about it?
Well, it doesn't need to be strategic. They want territorial expansion.
Okay, but like, how does that give them territorial expansion?
Because they think if they escalate gray zones more and more, they can build up to a fait accompli per Sedaris evidence, I think.
So like claiming 2 nautical miles like closer towards an uninhabited island is like, land reclaiming. I'm pretty sure they want.
Well, it's not land reclamation. One, it's taking so it's like land because it controls economic is something I like out.
You like that. It's fine. You can take this question. Or is that cross?
Yeah, that's cross.
Okay. We're gonna take a little bit of prep starting. That was 23. It's just going to be a normal rebuttal going down their case in order. Is anybody not prepared for me to begin? Okay. Beginning on their first argument about missiles, realize there is not going to be a war. As Rich 22 writes, North Korea is unlikely to use its nuclear weapons. North Korea already possesses the ability to inflict heavy damage with non-nuclear artillery. That said, North Korea's strategies don't preclude the use of nukes if it's seen as necessary for its survival. Thus, you can turn the argument. As Sharon 16 writes, given Pyongyang's history of perceiving any Japanese move as an existential threat, an offensive Japan may push Kim Jong-un to a nuclear preemptive strike. Then you can turn it again. As harboring bitter memories of Japan's World War II atrocities, Vogel 17 writes, Japan acting as normal without Article 9 will definitively aggravate tensions with South Korea. 2 implications. A, it erodes the credibility of Japan's deterrent, and B, it causes proliferation. As Yim21 writes, Japan could build a nuclear arsenal faster than South Korea could. This gives South Korea a strong incentive to build nuclear weapons preemptively. This provides Kim the ultimate incentive to first strike, especially given Yoon's hard stance. Also, prolif would complicate security dilemmas across the region, causing arms racing that overshadows Japan's capability. But lastly, we'd argue that Japan can't deter. As Wadsworth 19 writes, a conventional strike capability wouldn't eliminate the nuclear threat posed by North Korea because of mobile launch vehicles and underground silos. On testing, it's always ever been just testing. Make them prove to you why now, what's the exigence. On their argument about Taiwan, realize you can turn this against them. As Reuters 13 writes, Article 9 renounces the right to wage war and became a blanket ban on arms exports, revising the spike's escalation. As Ned 14 explains, a change in export rules could exacerbate tensions. The public sees Japan as more militant. Leaders will have domestic support to aggress. They also don't prove what the probability of escalation or miscalculation over Taiwan is. And they also don't explain how bad the war would necessarily be. China's not trying to kill all of Taiwan. They're trying to reclaim territory. And according to Blair, US experts treat the chance of nuclear escalation in Taiwan specifically between 0 and 0. So there's likely not that big of a war if it ever does occur. On their next argument argument of political capital. Realize first you can turn this as affirming crashes Japan's economy. Yamaguchi 19 explains, Article 9 enabled Japan to focus on economic growth with the defense budget while the defense budget was confined to 1%. Unfortunately, PSD 18 furthers a 1% increase in military spending, decreases growth by 9%. Military spending displaces more productive government investment. And two, you can turn it again. Militarization distracts from economic reform. As Gunnar 14 explains, Japan shifting toward greater militarization may distract it from devising sustainable economic reforms necessary for recovery. And one more time is affirming increases at taxation. AF 16 finds if Japan wants to build a modern military, it will take an incredible amount of capital. Taxes will have to go up. Raising taxes ends growth, causing deflation. Gabin 10 reports, Japan experienced a crisis in the 1990s as policymakers raised taxes, stalling recovery and setting off a debilitating cycle of falling prices. Also, their link evidence is really bad. It says it's cited in 2017, but it cites someone reporting in 2012 and offers no explanation for how it would end the debate. There would just be more debate over what the constitutional revisions would be and how to improve the economy, etc., all of which just increase delays in the process. Go to their next argument about gray zone warfare. First, realize it's not unique. As Kraska 20 writes, while Japan operates within the pacifist constitution, it has authority to respond to the full range of threats in the gray zone. Our evidence is just more specific. Two, gray zone operations stay gray. Layton 21 explains gray zone operations are designed to avoid military escalation. This requires operations to be tightly controlled at the tactical level by senior leaders. Gray zone activities are carefully scripted brinkmanship, superfluous in probability, as there have been hundreds of infractions for the last 25 years, but no escalation. Three, diplomacy solves. As Zhao 21 writes, China and Aishan have agreed on the code of conduct for the South China Sea. Beijing would never make further claims or take unilateral moves to intensify disputes, including it could avoid conflicts. Thus, Ngok 22 finds tensions between China have cooled even as China increased military activity in the South China Sea. Four, they say that it would complicate China's decisions if Japan were a deterrent, but that doesn't apply to gray zone warfare since the entire point is that it's gray. They have plausible deniability, low-level provocations, etc., nothing that would risk response. And fifth, Japan's strategically defensive posture doesn't matter. As Hornig writes, regardless of what Japan calls its new capabilities, the region will see them as offensive weapons. Revising the Article 9 is quite literally the opposite of sending a clear message, blurring the lines. Their impact evidence is also in the context of a US NFU. It has nothing to do with their case. But if anything, you can turn it. While China currently operates in the gray zone, affirming causes direct conflict through perceptions. As Anthony O2 writes, any change in Article 9 would immediately be perceived in Beijing as a clear signal that Japan has succumbed to nationalist forces, and Horning 20 furthers, China may have incentives to preemptively attack Japan to ensure early success. Thank you, and please vote neg.
Dubes, can I see all the terms on political capital, the first response on legal ambiguity, and the first response on gray zone?
What is legal ambiguity?
C2.
Wait, can you repeat that one more time? You wanted what?
I want the first response on legal ambiguity, all the terms on gray zone.
Jasper, you're cutting out for me. You want to type it in the chat?
Right, this might be an issue.
I got that you wanted the economy terms, and I sent those, but I kind of cut out after that. All right, I'm good. It's good. Okay. Sorry, T-Mobile expert is calling me apparently. Okay. All right, everything that you wanted is sent. Let me know when you get it. They're all separate emails.
Are they taking breakfast with you?
I've gotten the first one, but not no other emails.
Okay, just like wait for it to go through.
I just got them. I'm starting curve now. Okay.
Gomez.
Cool. So that was 108 taken. Order is gonna be RC1. I guess our case, their case.
Actually,
Do you want to take one?
one, I'll go.
Cool. All right, that was 10 more seconds, so 118. Cool. On our first contention about missile defense, Ishan says that North Korea won't go to war. We'll concede that, but neither of our arguments are about North Korea going to war. They're about miscalculation in the United States first striking, which means they don't have any offense here. The next thing they say is that Pyongyang will first strike. They just said North Korea won't go to war, so they probably won't. The next thing they say is that South Korea will get angry. One, so what Lee indicates, Smith indicates is that Lee, the current prime minister of South Korea, has urged Japan to switch its pacifist constitution, so South Korea won't be angry, but also things like sanctions and the NPT prevent South Korea from proliferating, which is probably not true that they will. The last thing they say is Japan can deter. That's not our argument. Our argument has nothing to do with anyone deterring North Korea, just about North Korean missile tests, which happen all the time, miscalculating, and Japan being forced to respond nuclearly. We're not going for argument at legal ambiguity. Go to political capital, group all three terms. One, the uniqueness evidence is conceded that there's going to be an economic crisis in Japan in the status quo given a lack of economic reforms, which means there's no uniqueness on their turns. Second, we would argue the economic reforms outweigh the turns because they can create much large scale and structural growth to the economy, which means we win that. And third, if we win a war argument, war destroys infrastructure and causes much more military spending, which means we turn all the turns. On the gray zone argument, we'll concede all the defense. They have conceded our argument that China is being expansionist now in the status quo in an attempt to gain more territory. But what Gomez indicates is you can solve when you affirm, because when you solve, you can allow Japanese to repurpose its defensive force as offensive, which means it's a deterrent against China, which solves the pain evidence individually. They see the pain evidence is about an NFU. It's about Chinese expansionism, which is what our argument is. Then they read an argument about first strike. Two responses. One, China won't be threatened, as Lin 18 writes that Japan's goal of the amendment is not to initiate a power struggle if Article 9 were amended. Tokyo would retain a passive subclause. Second, first strike fails, as Cavalry 20 writes that the PLA will be hard-pressed to maintain superiority in the region after preemptive strike, with the outlook for victory dim. The argument for preemptive strike weakens. Go to their case. On foreign aid, one, they concede and cross the South power is helpful, which means they'll do foreign aid regardless. Second, East Asia foreign rights, strategic disorientation of aid packages is clear. Both Vietnam and the Philippines have maritime disputes with China and are worried about China's flexing of its military muscle in the South China Sea. Japan's aid money is now increasingly linked to Japanese technology, design, and construction, which means it uses for hard power deterrence, which means they'll do it in both worlds. Three, Japan's foreign aid is ineffective, as NYU writes it. Japan's more stable and participatory aid model has only limited overall success and due tendencies to its utilized tied aid and depend on technical escorts, and the fact that it is often gone to corrupt governments. Go to Star Wars. One, Pecan 20 finds that fundamentally space technology is dual use, so it's a fiction to think that its commercial nature can be divorced from military uses, defensive or offensive. Japan has the capability to go to space now. Second, Japan's space militarization is needed as China is aggressive right now. So according to the Bulletin 20, China is creating armed resistance rates and threatening to shoot down Japanese satellites, threatening this calculation. The affirmative is the only solvency by offering deterrence. Three, on their impact, it's cut from a part that says past operations in 1999 should have triggered their evidence that says that the decision is part of Japan to build an explicitly intelligence-focused satellite that was in response to North Korea's missile test in 1999. So clearly there's a capability now. But four, the Mitchell 1 evidence is talking about any space buildup, which means any of the space buildups in the last 21 years would trigger their impact. On alliances, one, turn at revision leads to collective, one, turn at regionalism. Panton 10 writes that regional actors want to ally with Japan and will do so if they have the capability to counterbalance China. Patton concludes Article 9 is the revision to do so and will lead to deterrence. But second, the United States has asked Japan to amend Article 9 to solve overshift issues. To Script 20 confirms that the United States has publicly reaffirmed its desire for the new interpretation. And three, credits don't spill over, as Beinhardt 18 writes The logic is wrong. Decades of academic research show that there's little evidence that supports that using countries' records for keeping commitments to determine their credibility, far from bolstering a country's credibility and solvent commitments drain finances, overstretch military, and undermine its reputation. On constitutional chaos, one, Lyft writes that even if Abe's party adopts the 2012 framework, intense negotiations and considerations to the public are likely to significantly moderate its proposal. Second, we get instant fiat, otherwise we can't debate policies that are controversial and never get passed, which means there isn't a political Article 9 gets resolved. But third, Malk 21 writes that recent democratic regression suggests that democracy is weak across all of East Asia. One factor, our citizens' attitudes and political trust is crucial for democratic stability. Empirical analysis shows citizens in Japan appear to be more resilient to democratic regression. So Japanese citizens check. On modeling, one, the Lin 19 pacifism response from the front line applies here. Japan's not going to have a pacifist constitution. The modeling still stays. Two, no other countries are pacifist, which clearly proves that Japan's model doesn't work as a modeling. Three, Chern, Hornick, 16 for that Japan revises its constitution after a lengthy debate in the Diet in the national referendum will not only mean the country's returning to military, we sign up healthy democracy. And four, given the fact that China's aggressive now per the considered unique evidence, pacifism is clearly not a good model because it leads to more Chinese aggression. So the modeling argument's bad.
The fourth response started over time. Can we scratch it?
Whatever you say, Sean. Anything for you.
If I asked all the judges, just like vote for us. Whatever you say is what you said.
No, not that, Ishan.
Worth a try.
Don't get technical with me now.
All right, can you send the Lin evidence that they'll always be pacifist?
Yeah.
And then your responses to the preemptive strike on Grey Zone.
Sure. Lin is one of those.
Oh,
You want Lin and then first strike fails. I can send both.
fantastic. Is there anything else?
Oh, do you want to grab the turn on regional?
Yeah, and both the turns on credibility.
Was it 2 or 1?
I think it was 2.
I got 2.
Weinhardt.
Okay. Let me get this one at a time. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So the I just did something stupid and just sent them to you personally. Let me put them back in the email chain. I think. Yeah. So.
All right, Jasper.
Sorry. Yeah. My bad. All right. So that's the 2 things on first strike, and then you want what else?
Credibility turns.
Okay. Okay. That's the first. All right. The first credibility term is in. No, the first one was yeah, there's no first turn. I started reading it and then cut it because of the time constraints. So it's
Okay.
just the evidence I just sent.
So no counterbalancing?
It's regionalism, so it is kind of balancing, yeah. But it was a SoCo specific argument I didn't read.
Okay, sure. Great. Once we get that, Ben and I are going to take some prep. We use like 23 or something. Yeah, and then we'll just run. Okay. Thank you. Starting All right, Jasper, do you mind clarifying your last two responses? I think it was
Yeah, so the last two, the first one was that the second to last one was that the fact that no other country is a pacifist proves Japan's model is not working for restoring peace. The third response is that given that your claim is that Japan amends its constitution in a democratic way, it is not a signal of weak democracy or of increased aggression. It's actually a signal of democracy. It's like a signal of democratic working.
we'll use more. All right, ready for cross?
Absolutely, Ishan.
Okay. I guess the first question I have is more of a clarifying one. So what argument are you presenting as like a reason to vote for you in today's debate?
Like they're all reasons to vote for us. I don't know. Like I'm pretty convinced that right now we've already won the debate because all these arguments are just so compelling and convincing.
You're entitled to your opinion, Jasper. To ask a quick follow-up, I think you said something, we'll concede the defense on, can you explain what you meant by that, like on gray zones?
Oh, it means we're not going to go for the gray zones argument. So I guess all the arguments but that one. It's a very astute observation, Ishan. Okay. Let me ask you a question now. Cool. If China's aggressive now, does that mean that like things like space races are inevitable?
Aggressive in one area doesn't mean aggressive in another, so no.
But if they're just being expansionary, does that not mean into every theater?
Well, I mean, you'd have to prove it into every theater. I mean, like, even if they're expanding in space, it's not like they're expanding into space to like shoot laser beams down at everyone on Earth. So, no. Can I get a question?
I don't think anyone's doing that ever.
Yeah, probably not. No.
I read a blog. It said you can't make lightsabers in real life.
Actually, my friend showed me one the other day. It's pretty cool. Okay.
Really?
Let's talk about the political capital argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you mentioned that, or what's the impact of Japan, like economic reforms? Like, what does it do?
Lots of growth, lots of poverty reduction. We'll weigh it against your advocacy in Lincoln.
Actualize that.
People leave poverty, so they die less.
Okay, and then to confirm, you also said that if you win a link into war, that it would hurt the economy. So you agree that war hurts the economy?
Yeah, we think the war debate comes first.
Okay, so war is more important than the economy?
Yeah.
Okay, we can get a question.
Yeah. Why are no other countries pacifist?
What?
Why are no other countries except for Japan pacifist?
A loaded question, because we think that they are.
What's an example of a country with a pacifist constitution that isn't Japan?
You don't need a constitution to be pacifist. Like, for example, South Korea, they very well could have nuclear weapons. And
all right, cool. If they don't need a constitution, then why does this constitutional revision matter?
It
hangs as a pacifist anyway.
If I may finish. So it's not necessarily that these other countries need a constitution, but the Tonneson evidence, which is very, very explicit, explains how from that area in which there weren't a pacifist constitution, they had nothing to look up to or model from. Like, for example, having a country like Japan, which has been mired with threats, etc., and people like attacking them, they still retain this pacifist constitution as a symbol of a democratic society, and not just democratic society, but a peaceful society, which is what's uniquely key. Can I get a question? Or
yeah. We're out of time, but this is, as usual, a splendid cross with you. I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah. All right, we have 10 seconds left for me. Is that?
Oh, switch your volume. Yeah. Okay. Is everyone ready? The order is going to be, okay. I'm actually going to start really quickly on the top of their case. I'm going to move, Wang, go to our case, do Wang, go back to their case. Okay, cool. go on the top of their case. They concede the rich evidence because they don't respond to it correctly. They say our argument isn't about North Korea going to war. Yes, that's what we're saying. The rich evidence tells you that independently, North Korea is unlikely to use its nuclear weapons unless they are fearing for their life. And they concede the Shuraran evidence that tells you, given Pyongyang's history of perceiving Japanese moves as existential threats, they will. That's why we tell you war is more likely, and it quite literally causes miscalculation because they'll fire a nuclear weapon or something that leads to conflict. This outweighs for two reasons. First, they conceded that they've been testing forever, so this is a more likely link than testing. But secondly, they conceded that war is more likely in a use it or lose it scenario than miscalculation, which is what Korea is essentially being put under. But let's go to our case. Firstly, you can go to modeling, but you can extend it. Article 9 created a peaceful development model adopted by the entire East Asian region, lowering conflict by over 70%. Revision would upset the peaceful balance, fearing a return to conflict. Tensions and rising militarization would fuel a conflict that would invite international draw and risking a nuclear war through miscalculation, extinction through a radiation-caused nuclear winter. They give you one response about Lin, which is that they're already pacifist. Yes, but we're telling you Article 5 or Article 9 quite literally removes the if you like change the Constitution, it removes the entire reason they're pacifist. It is a change to their Constitution that is a huge international signal. Then they tell you, oh well, others are pacifists. That is not our argument. These countries aren't going to war. We're telling you right now they're essentially cooled down. They've retained their cool, but in the event that in the event that Japan goes offensive, they lose their cool because they now have to aggress against an aggressive country. Also, this doesn't they talk about democracy. This doesn't matter. Democracy isn't about war. Our argument is about war. When you essentially put Japan in this position, war starts. On weighing, first off, understand we outweigh because this encompasses the entire globe, and without peaceful environments, you invite miscalculation everywhere. Also, it causes an international draw-in from countries everywhere because nothing is peaceful. On their turns on space race, first off, we agree we should have seen war. It doesn't matter. But secondly, on their second term, they don't prove Japan can counterbalance. There isn't any evidence, and they don't give you a warrant. But secondly, we're telling you Japan is going to anger other neighbors, so they definitely can't counterbalance. But also, if Japan gets aggressive, that means China gets aggressive, which is a way worse scenario. Let's go to their case. They concede the Reuters evidence, and that literally, like Holt concedes on political capital. The Reuters evidence tells you Article 9 renounces the right to wage war and become a blanket ban on arms export, reversing the spikes escalation. The NED 14 evidence tells you a change in export rules can exacerbate tension, and that if the public sees them as more militant, the leaders will have domestic support to aggress, and that impacts the entire region, which is way worse. But then on their political capital argument, they cold concede the PSD evidence that tells you a 1% increase in military spending decreases growth by 9%. You're not going to get some magical like economic reform that's going to fix everything in the world. Think about it. The U.S. can't even pass a good economic reform. Why on earth can Japan do it? Also, also on the Reuters, it leads to extinction from nuclear miscalculation. That's the impact on their gray zones argument. First off, they conceded the Leveson evidence that tells you it stays gray because it's always been gray. It's been gray for 25 years. But also, you can classify the uniqueness that U.S. credibility is high now. So China is not going to be expansionist. That's cold conceded at that point. You can just buy our uniqueness that the argument's never going to happen. Please vote, Nick.
On prep, can you repeat the last response about expansionism?
Yeah, it's that you conceded our uniqueness, right? That right now the U.S. Credibility is high. That means China is not going to be expansionist because they're not going to poke the bear, basically.
Yeah, we'll take prep. It was 15 seconds. Pause for about 50 seconds. Can I see the rich evidence? We'll stop.
Sorry, what do you need?
I need the rich evidence about Korea.
Do you want the other part of the turn or just rich?
I just need the rich part.
Okay. Okay, percent. No.
All right, I'll keep unmuted. I'll let you know when we get up.
All right. Also, Jasper, I'm gonna run to the restroom, so hold off the.
No worries. No worries. We'll just deal prep if you're not back. Okay, we got it. Resuming prep. It's 105 taken. Uh, 215 taken. Can we see the card for the exports turn too? And again, we'll go like this.
Which
Thank you,
card?
man. Just the exports turn argument.
That was Ishan's back. Ishan, they want the exports turn argument.
Oh, they want?
The exports turn argument.
Okay. Am I muted?
Yeah. Also, wasn't that 105 or am I tripping?
No, we're at 215 taken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're gonna be almost out.
Said ARM exports, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Sent.
Okay, I'll let you know when I get it. And I'll keep unmuted too. So who knows? This is not some sus stuff going on. All right, I got it. I'm gonna mute then resume prep.
That's all of our. I want to debate on your computer because I feel like the Wi-Fi's a little better. No, okay. Sure. It's going to be their case on C4. And then I'm going to go to. Sorry, Jasper has to deal with the echo stuff. Their case on C4. Our case on the turn on arms exports. Our North Korean scenario. Our China scenario on C4. All right.
Into the wing on there.
I will.
20 seconds.
All right. Those are my first words. The Lin evidence ends around, it's really good. It says that under all proposed plans for reinterpretation or a revision of the Constitution, they don't change the second clause of Article 9, which means that they can't ever go to war, which means one, there's no perceptual signal for North Korea to get mad at, because the Lin evidence precludes the ability that they can attack North Korea, but it also kills their C4 about constitutional, about modeling, because the pacifism of Japan never changes. They can still never go to war. Their link never triggers. On the weighing, they say that they outweigh because they have all these kinds of regional conflicts that are global. All of our conflicts are also global insofar as they all include the US, and whenever the US goes to conflict, all of our allies are obligated to go with us because of our massive amount of security treaties. Go to our case. On the turn, they try to say that there's going to be more arms exports. If we win a war scenario, we win this arms exports argument. One, because Japan has to buy arms to defend themselves. But secondly, because if there's a large war, the US will just provide the entire world with weapons, which definitely outweighs our argument to a greater extent because it's not just one small exporter, it's the biggest exporter increasing it. Go to our argument about missile defense. They make this turn about North Korea. One, called their evidence. Their rich evidence says that they won't go to war even with a decrease in tensions and an increase failing in relations, which means that I doubt that Japan can do a better job of failing in relations than South Korea can. They probably don't have a link here. But secondly, even if they do, we'd say, per our argument, that again, there's no reason for them to change anything. If the pacifist part of the Constitution never changes, the relations are never heard, all their evidence assumes an interpretation that will never happen. But then they just never respond to our argument. They try to do weighing against miscalculation. They missed the entire first warrant of our argument. Our Tashino evidence finds that because of Article 9, Japan can't check for missiles that fly over its territory. Now, Miki evidence finds that because of that, they are able to test an IBCM 2 months ago, which is now capable of striking the US, which gives them a second strike capability and unchecks them to have an unchecked arms buildup, which our RUV evidence finds means that they will have a second strike capability that will let them develop hundreds of nuclear IBCMs, which will force the US to intervene preemptively, causing a global war with strikes on the US doing intentionally, and the North Korea responding with strikes on cities that kill millions of people. And independently, we definitely think there's star evidence because we have an actual card that links to nuclear use, and the star evidence finds like causes extinction. On the weighing one, the uniqueness scenario is considered that they already have the second strike capability that they have. Right, North Korea has developed the second strike capability. So which means war is inevitable because we're on the warpath. Our argument definitely also wins on time frame. Secondly, which means it's try out of the app. But secondly, we definitely want to strike the link. They just never contested the second link where they need the scenario. It's just like really easy to vote for us. Go to gray zones. We can also vote for us on our China scenario. They never contest our Lind evidence, our Pain evidence, saying that China is expansionist because they have political support that they need to drive through expansionist nationalist policy that appeals to the Xi Jinping's base of voter base in China that he wants to do to make sure that he doesn't have a regime change, which is why there's always going to be expansion. They say that the uniqueness means U.S. credibility is high. That doesn't matter as both our Pain and Lind evidence happened in 2018 and 2016. Even when U.S. credibility was high, they were still expansionists because they don't care, because they don't think the U.S. is willing to project power that far off seas. What they do care about is one, regional security. They conceded the Panton evidence on their case as a turn that when you affirm Japan will be able to contribute to regional alliances, which can anchor a net of allies that can respond to China and have a credible deterrent against them. And also because of the Gomez evidence that Japan is a credible regional actor, can respond without needing parity to China because they can respond. And our Pan evidence finds it'll kill hundreds of millions, also escalating into a multi-actor war with same weighing. We read the top stuff. Also, unique scenario isn't contested really, so same way.
All right, ready for cross?
Yeah.
Okay. So how is the link that you're going for on this China contention different than the one you initially read in your case?
So all your arguments are about gray zone escalation. We backline your indict to we group them and say there's another link we could go for, which is the Gomez evidence about straight deterrence and counterbalancing through what?
Whatever.
I can't hear. Also, the regionalism argument is independently conceded in your case, which also solves for conflicts. Because
you read like 3 front lines to regionalism.
No, you read 0 front lines to regionalism.
No. We responded to regionalism.
No, Ishan, no. Don't try this one on me this time. Yeah. See, I've gotten better at flowing. See, I can tell. You didn't respond.
Right, y'all can take a question.
Yeah. Yeah, do you have a question? Cool. Is this exports argument about trade, right? Or it's about arms, right? Does it come before or after war? It's like war. Do you agree that does your war scenario come before or after this?
No, arm exports come before.
Why?
Okay, so the argument is that if it revised Article 9, it'd be able to export arms. And so as a result of those exporting of arms, those would destabilize countries and lead to conflict. Okay. So that comes before. So can you actually, a question on that, can you explain what your weighing was about the US and
The weighing is that when there is a global war, Japan buys more arms.
Yeah, and the U.S. has to fund all sides, and so they sell arms to everyone.
Yeah, so there's both more Japanese arms and globally more arms sales, which is an impact magnifier on your link.
All right, y'all can take a question.
I think we just asked one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was like a follow-up from the last one. You can have one.
Okay. Okay, we can talk about the North Korea thing. So, and revises Article 9, are they doing anything? Are they building anything?
Say that again?
And revises Article 9, are they building anything?
Probably not.
So then what's the link?
To what?
The first content.
Our argument is that the reason that they have a second strike capability is because even though they already have weapons, if they can shoot them over Japan without them being shot down, it lets them enable strikes on anywhere in the world, basically. But Japan, basically, as a mobile BMP base, can stop this from having any impact on the Western Hemisphere. So that they don't have to
which importantly is not a break from pacifism, because you're not attacking anyone or killing anyone.
Again, what changes when you revise Article 9?
They can use their existing BMD technology to shoot down North Korean nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they don't have, the US won't feel like Japan has, but like North Korea has a second threat capability against them. So they don't feel like North Korea is going to build up hundreds of IBCMs for an eventual strike against them. And so they don't have an incentive for attacking first.
All right, thank you. Let's crossfire. Okay, so we're out of prep. It'll start on the app case on their first contention, and I'll be very clear where I go from there. Okay. Is anybody not ready for me to begin? Okay. First voting issue in the debate is North Korea. Our rich evidence is fantastic. It says that North Korea is unlikely to use nuclear weapons, things like ICBMs, etc., unless they see it as a threat to their survival, which precludes their offense. However, a world in which Kim Jong-un and Pyongyang perceives the Japanese move as an existential threat for assurance evidence, an offensive Japan may push Kim Jong-un to a nuclear preemptive strike. Now, they cross-applied this pacifist subclause to that argument newly in their speech, so I should get new responses. This doesn't apply because our evidence talks about historical motivations, and that being the reason as to why they necessarily perceive it as an existential threat. Moreover, the evidence is incredibly explicit in saying that it's about the posture of North Korea and their ability to do things like their link says, develop BMDs and be able to shoot down North Korean missiles, which is what is the existential threat, and that leads to a nuclear strike. Prefer our argument because you don't know when war happens. They never contextualize that once in the debate. Don't confuse by what they're saying in these big terms, but you do know that there is no war now and that a war happens as soon as Kim Jong-un perceives a threat. That said, second place you can vote is our argument about arm exports. We say that if Japan revises Article 9, they're able to export arms throughout the East Asian region, which would destabilize the region because now there's arms floating around the region. They say that they prereq with like U.S. conflict. No, because the conflict would have had to start in the first place. But what starts the conflict is the arm exports. So our argument outweighs, since it comes first on time frame, it's a priority question. On their contention 4, they're doing this really weird weighing thing where they're saying that they have a totally new link, but that doesn't respond to the idea that U.S. credibility is strong now and we haven't seen Chinese expansion. When are 100 million people going to die? When does it escalate? You do know, however, that the model that East Asia has created has checked the risk of escalation and conflict, which caps all of their arguments. That said, let's go to our case. Oh, quickly on the regionalism thing, we responded to that on our case. We said there's no evidence indicating Japan is necessarily key and that it would be perceived as aggressive, so obviously it doesn't matter. On modeling, Japan has created a peaceful model for development via Article 9, which has dropped debt to war by 70%. A world in which it revises Article 9 is a world in which we upend the system. It leads to things like WMDs, etc. They say they have a passive subclass. That does not matter. The pacifism in the model comes from Article 9 itself, and the ability to develop weapons is what disrupts it. Our Tonneson evidence is fantastic. It's phenomenal. You can look at it. That the 70% reduction in drops debt due to war was because of Article 9 specifically. Any risk of upending this model draws in actors and makes all of their arguments a whole lot worse. Vote for the clearest arguments on the negative side.
Can you repeat 2 things for me, because my Wi-Fi is kind of bad, so I cut out. Responses to regionalism quickly.
1, evidence doesn't warrant why Japan is uniquely key to doing it. 2, they would anger neighbors. So if they try to do regional cooperation, they just get cornered and nothing happens.
Okay, and then what was the background to Lynn?
Damn, I spent like 15 seconds on that. Okay.
My Wi-Fi bad.
It doesn't matter if they have a pacifist subclause. It's their ability to develop weapons, which Tonneson says is the model for peaceful development in East Asia. And I asked if the judges want to see, look at the evidence.
Cool.
So any risk of that still links into the argument.
Cool. Starting on modeling, then no code, then Briza. Cool. On modeling, some of the Lin evidence, it indicates that Japan will retain the pacifist subclause when a revised Article 9, because that's how every reinterpretation of Article 9 has been proposed. This takes them out of their arguments. Japan is still pacifist. They say the ability to create weapons means that Japan's longer pacifist. This is a debate argument, not a real life argument. Clearly, it's clearly the signal is still sent that Japan keeps its pacifist signal up. The trust and evidence is not good enough. Go to North Korea. On the turn 1, rich evidence is explicit that a debilitation of tensions is not enough for North Korea to go to war. That is what their own evidence indicates, which means that the affirmative isn't true. Second, they say it's about historical fears, but they have conceded that the pacifist subclause means there are no historical fears because Japan still will not go to war.
So extend our argument. Because of Article 9, North Korea has been free to shoot missiles over Japan because of their constitutional pacifism. With the development of a massive range ICBM, they have second strike capabilities against the United States. However, if Japan revises Article 9, they're now allowed to shoot down these missiles, preventing North Korea's second strike. This causes war. If North Korea is allowed a second strike, they feel free from the United States military pressure and will build up hundreds of ICBMs, which is why a robe evidence finds the United States will first strike them before the missiles become an overwhelming force. This would escalate to global war, drawing on U.S. allies, causing nuclear strikes in U.S. cities, which links to the star evidence about extinction. This outweighs their scenario because it goes with the United States and goes nuclear. It also is conceded, which means you prefer it. Go to the arms race argument. This argument is never contextualized or warranted in any speech. Moreover, if we win a war scenario, we also win the arms increase, which means there's going to be more aggression. But also, as long as we're winning our China uniqueness, that means that China is still going to be aggressive, which means Japan needs to arm themselves defensively more. So go to gray zone. Extend the Linden Payne evidence to indicate that China is a revisionist power who's being incredibly aggressive. The status quo as its economy declines, which is why it's expanding now. They say that its credit is strong. Let's not interact with the idea that there's still escalations that are increasing the status quo, but we saw through regionalism. Our argument through the Panton evidence indicates that to affirm the resolution, you can create regional coalitions through Japan's strong military status as a both military and peaceful power. They say there's no evidence is specific to Japan. Yes, it is. They say there's no warrant. Why? Yes, there is. It's also conceded in their last speech, which A, links to the Payne evidence that we saw hundreds of millions of deaths, which and independently links to our conflict scenario, but B, is also considered and outweighs their case of magnitude. It's contextualized. Vote neg.
Yeah, thank you. Please vote neg. All right, good round, Jasper.
Oh, vote app. I do that every round, you know. See, Sean? You always get in my head.
All right, yeah, great round, everyone. All right. We'll wait.
All right, I was the last judge to submit as I anticipated. I will go through the decision, but first, congrats to everyone on breaking at the TOC and making it this far into our rounds. That's super impressive. It ended up being a 2-1 for the neg from Strake. Does the judge that voted AF want to go first?
So I voted for the AF. I'll just highlight, one key point where I was looking for a good counter. So I think, it was Theo who made it clear up front saying that, hey, if Article 9 is revised, all other clauses would also need to be revised because they're all interconnected. And at the same time, desire for constitutional revision has cost political capital and left pressing domestic issues unattended. So the biggest thing that is hurting Japan today is the indecisiveness, right? And if something is causing a regression for a very developed country, then it needs to be addressed. And this has, to support this argument, they went ahead and said, hey, they need to build stronger coalitions, stronger alliances. How will that happen? And they're saying, hey, that can happen only if Article 9 revises, then Japan is taken seriously by the regional alliances. And then they understand that there is a support for them when they go after, when China has these expansionist policies. So there is an ability for regional alliances to get stronger because Japan has shown the seriousness. And the people in power are the ones holding it back. And that's exactly how I looked at things, right? So it is very important for for the NAG team to counter this aspect of it. I don't know how we would have countered it, but I was looking at that aspect of it because if something is holding a country back, if it is on one end, it's just the military stance and all the others are interconnected, then you have to make a decision. And this decision, who is very key, is exactly the point that the AF team was trying to make. So I didn't see a counter for it, so I had to vote for them. That's where it was, yeah.
I can go unless you wanted to go first.
Yeah, can I go first? I have to head out for class soon.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of why I voted the way that I did, let me pull up my RC. There were a bunch of arguments at the beginning from both sides, and I didn't get a priority weighing of the arguments until the end, like which ones should be prioritized. And it seemed like whether war will happen seems to be like the first thing that I needed to consider in the debate. So like I'm considering that as like the top of the priority list. And here I buy the next argument that the war in Japan, like in China, between China and Japan, or Japan and any other combinations within Asia, seems not inevitable. I don't think the app does a good job warranting why war right now is going to happen and why like Article 9 said happen, but really revised so that Japan could start building up their military capabilities. I thought the neg did a better job in showing that the conflict escalation will happen when you change Article 9 by giving Japan the power to export arms, and North Korea would then feel threatened. In terms of like the two warranting there, I thought the neg arms exports was much stronger than the North Korea point, because the AF does a good like pointed out that how like doesn't explain how like Article 9 and a military like Article 9 and like how that revising it would make North Korea feel like they're all doomed, and like they're all like that key evidence that the neg or the AF like repeats over and around, but how tensions are not the end all be all thing that will have North Korea escalate conflict in the region. But rather it's like the idea that Kim Jong-un is going to feel like their survival is being threatened. And that distinction, that bright line, isn't explained or warranted. But I still ultimately think that tension can lead to escalation of like a bigger conflict, a war. So that's why I voted the way I did.
Well, yeah, so I thought this was a really close debate that I think could have benefited from a much more cohesive collapse strategy in the second half, and clearer warrant crystallization. But I ended up voting neg for a couple of reasons. I'll start on the North Korea argument. Basically, I think that the neg is ahead here. They tell me that North Korea won't use nukes unless it's a matter of regime survival, which is why a strike only happens when you affirm, because they view that Japan's ability to strike down nuclear weapons as an existential threat because of these like historical motivations. The AF says that the rich evidence says that's not enough to like for North Korea to justify going to war, but that's not what the rich evidence says. It says that North Korea will take actions that they view as necessary for regime survival, and there's no answer to the warranting that the neg makes that that they do view this as like something necessary for regime survival, which even if that argument isn't like completely true in the context of the round, I think that that's enough to create some risk that like when you affirm this conflict does happen. The app also makes this argument that maintaining pacifism means that North Korea won't be afraid of the possibility of Japan striking them, but a couple problems with that. The first is that the neg is making arguments that this isn't just like fear of Japan going to war, but more so fear of Japan's newfound capabilities under the revised constitution, but also that this relies on the AF winning that Japan maintains pacifism, which I don't really think that they do. I'm going to address that when I get to the neg case. But at that point, I think that the neg is winning a link into the potential for a war spiraled by the like North Korea use it or lose it scenario, and the neg timeframe weighing is pretty clear that this could happen immediately when you affirm, whereas we don't know the AF timeline. The second place that I think I can negate, although I do so like skeptically, is on this like arms sales argument. The neg tells me that revision of Article 9 means that Japanese arms sales that destabilize the region, or means more Japanese arms sales that destabilize the region and lead to war. The AF response is predicated on winning that a US war scenario means these arms sales happen regardless, and that their like war scenario is more important. But I don't think that that is an argument that is being won, and also the immediacy of the neg world probably outweighs per the neg's timeframe weighing. But like I said, I think the North Korea is a much more clear path to the ballot for me. So like in the event that they're not winning that, I don't know if I would feel comfortable also giving this offense to the neg, but I don't think it really matters that much. On gray zones, the AF tells me that China is being aggressive in the status quo with these like low-level escalations that revising Article 9 can solve through the regionalism argument. There are a few problems with this, the main one being that the AF isn't super extending this argument, and I don't really have any idea at what point this conflict escalates enough in the status quo to cause this level of like death that they're going for, especially when their winning strat or their path to the ballot is predicated on winning the magnitude of their war scenario, which is particularly damaging when the neg has conceded the time frame weighing. that their like war scenario happens first when you affirm. I also just don't think that there's a clear answer to the argument that Japan will be seen as aggressive in the AF world, which means China is more likely to be aggressive in response when you affirm. That's kind of predicated on the idea that Japan maintains pacifism, which, like I said, is an argument that I don't feel comfortable evaluating as terminal defense to the neg. On the neg case, the neg tells me that Article 9 revisions will ruin pacifism in Japan and actually destabilize the region and ruin this like Asian peace that's lasted for decades. The main AF response is based on the evidence that Japan remains pacifist when you affirm. But I think that evidence just says it's likely that they remain pacifist, which is evidence the entire AF defense is based off of. And also the neg is winning, that this like signal of retracting from pacifism is still sent, meaning that the neg wins here. I think reading more explicit evidence that like about like why that pacifism remains beyond just like that's the general like consensus right now of what they want to do would probably help, especially since that's like the main argument you all are using to like prereq the neg. But overall, I think the biggest problem is that the neg is just very explicitly clear in what impact scenarios that they're going for, and I'm a little bit less clear on what the path to the ballot is for the AF, which makes it like easy for me to buy the like neg's time frame win, which is ultimately how I vote. But like I said, good round, everyone.
I have a question. It's not a post-round question. I'm wondering, is the ideal AF final focus then more implication on the Lin evidence and how that applies to the North Korea scenario, and then collapsing on either one of the two scenarios would you end up going for?
Definitely the collapsing on either one of the two scenarios would have been helpful. Yeah. Also the implications of the Lin evidence, although I think that needs to be earlier than final focus, as well as just like the, Japan being historically pacifist means they continue to maintain pacifism. Public support being pacifist means they continue to like having like more reasoning than just like the kind of like ominous, like most constitutional proposals are related to that, like would help.
Sure, okay. You think we can do like analytical warranting that supports why Lin is true beyond like the most like given that if their case is about the spirit of pacifism, could be like the spirit of pacifism is why they retain the subclause? Like if Japan, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think so.
And then it was probably better to go for the wacky gray zone thing, right? Or like the China escalation argument, given that they have better ink on NOCO, right?
I mean, I don't know. I think like, I guess I don't know because the round would look entirely different if you go for like a different argument. But like, I guess I don't know. I don't know if I just can't like think coherently enough to like envision what that round looks like right now. But
yeah, no, it's cool anyway. This is my last round, so. All right, thank you guys all so much for
judging. Good round.
Congrats on a great round, y'all.
Win this damn thing, yeah?
Yeah, Ishan, you got it, bro. You got it. Good luck. I'm very happy.
Good luck, guys. Yeah.